The Insurrection Clause strategy, the reason the Democrats very interested in prosecuting and convicting Donald Trump. Vivek gave us a little bit of a rundown on this. We'll check in with the other GOP candidates as well, including Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis. But this is a curious strategy that we've been following for some time here. Remember that the 14th Amendment has a very interesting provision in there called the Insurrection Clause, and Democrats have been wanting to use the Insurrection Clause to boot Donald Trump off of ballots. We were wondering when this was going to come into play, or how the January 6th Select Committee would come to a conclusion about why Donald Trump needs to be removed from the process, and they pass a continuing resolution or something, right? Some sort of internal procedure that is abstract that the House does. But this may not be happening at the federal level. This may be happening at the local state level. And so when we were covering this, we came across this guy named John Bonifaz. He's the co-founder of an organization called Free Speech for People, which is hilariously trying to remove people's ability to express themselves by keeping Donald Trump off the ballot so that people can't vote at all. So he had two comments about this, and they are actually already sending letters out to different states demanding Trump be removed from the ballots under the Insurrection Clause. And so this is already happening. But now that Trump is about to be indicted for J6, officially indicted for Insurrection-E related crimes, we know this is going to go up times 1,000. And if he's actually convicted in any way, shape, or form, it's times 1,000,000, because they can say, look, he was convicted of the crime. But even now, if Trump is charged, they can just say, hold. We got to hold. We can't put Trump on the ballot until the case is resolved. And so he can't even be printed on the paper until the case is settled. And if the case is not settled in time for the election, that's not the state's fault. Trump shouldn't have been charged, and we can't have possible criminals on state ballots. So this was sent over to the Secretary of State by the Free Speech for People organization. We read through this whole thing in a different video, and so I'd invite you to watch that if you want to see it. But long story short, they're saying you as the Secretary of State have authority to exclude from any ballot any presidential candidate who does not meet qualifications, including under the Insurrection Clause under the 14th Amendment. And so just briefly, this is what the amendment actually says over from our friends at Cornell Law School. You'll find it in Section 3. It says, no person shall be a senator or elector of president or other office if they've already taken an oath as a member of an elected body, if that person here shall have engaged in insurrection. Congress may vote by 2/3 to remove the disability. And so that would be the federal government in Congress placing a conviction upon somebody through the courts, and then Congress removing the disability that was placed upon that person. And I don't expect that to happen. Okay, we're not getting 2/3 of the House or the Senate to agree to exonerate Trump. I don't think that is going to happen at all. So that is the status. And now this guy says the enforcement mechanism is very simple. All you've got to do is just get the secretaries of state to come to their own conclusions that this is okay to remove Trump. And if the DOJ actually charges him and indicts him on this, that is the pretext to keep him off the ballots. Here is this argument. Then we'll listen to Vivek.
There's nothing in the language of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment that requires, for example, a prior conviction or even a prior indictment or a tribunal of any kind having to rule before those who are in charge of regulating state ballots enforce Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. So we've been calling on secretaries of state and chief election officials all across the country to apply the mandate of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment based on their own authority to regulate the state ballot. So, for example, Glenn, the Constitution does not allow a 15-year-old to run for president of the United States or to run for Congress, for that matter. And any secretary of state who received a petition from a candidate of that age, and my daughter's that age, I think she'd be a great candidate, but anyone who received a petition to be on the ballot at that age for that kind of office would be automatically barred based on the Constitution, based on the age qualification. There's also a citizenship qualification, there's a residency qualification, and following the 14th Amendment, there's a qualification that you must have not taken an oath of office and then engaged in insurrection if you want to serve in public office. So the enforcement of this really goes to the secretaries of state and the chief election officials who are in charge of regulating state ballots. It's also true.
So they're going to try to do this. They're already trying to do it. And Vivek is sounding the alarm. Here's what he posted on Twitter in response to the Trump indictment. He said, "The left calls January 6 a threat to our democracy. quote. But the ultimate threat is when politically unaccountable actors literally remove democratically elected officials from office. That's why the pending January 6th indictment of Trump is arguably the most dangerous of all to our constitutional republic. I believe the federal administrative police state is preparing to invoke the Insurrection Clause from Section 3 of the 14th Amendment to disqualify Trump from running in a way that past indictments technically would not. This isn't theoretical. New Mexico County Coy Griffin, who we've covered here, was removed from office after his election from being present at the Capitol, even though he was there and peaceful. That sets a dangerous precedent. States like New Mexico could do the same thing, try to keep Trump off the ballot. And a prosecution by Jack Smith would only strengthen their argument for doing so. It is un-American for the ruling party, Biden, and the Democrats to use police power to arrest its chief political rivals. We need to know what Biden told Garland and what Garland told Jack Smith. We should know whose invisible hand is guiding these indictments, which is why I filed a FOIA request, Freedom of Information, demand to uncover exactly what the White House communicated to Garland and Smith to target Biden's disfavored opponent in this election. Vivek says we'll get to the bottom of it, including by suing in federal court if necessary. I will address this and how we will shut down this corrupt administrative state on Thursday when I'm in New Hampshire. Great statement from Vivek. Here is what he said.
I want to tell you the story of Coy Griffin. He was a democratically elected county commissioner in Otero County in New Mexico. Why am I telling you his story? Because he was elected, but he was removed from office. And it was held as a final removal from office by the New Mexico State Supreme Court this February, just days before I declared my own candidacy for U.S. president. Why was he removed? It was because the New Mexico courts held that he was an insurrectionist because he was present on January 6, 2021. Was he violent? No, he was not. Was he carrying a weapon? No, he was not. Did he enter the Capitol? No, he did not. But nonetheless, because he was present on the Capitol grounds that day, he was held to be an insurrectionist, even though he wasn't convicted for a felony or anything of the kind. There was a petition against him to remove him from office, and that's exactly what happened. Why?
Just a simple petition. Just get some signatures, file it, get a bunch of the other bureaucrats to say, yeah, get rid of him.
Do I bring that up? That's now relevant today, as it appears likely that Donald Trump will now be apparently indicted imminently, if the current facts reported today are to be believed, for his role in January 6th. What does that do? This is different from any of the other prior indictments against Trump, and people are missing the importance of this indictment in particular. Not only is this a federal indictment like the last one in the documents case, but more importantly, this one under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment could disqualify President Trump from either running for U.S. president or potentially even being removed as U.S. president if he is elected. I think this sets a dangerous precedent in our country. It's worth understanding the history here. Section 3 of the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution says that anyone who's taken an oath to office, a congressman, a senator, or a president, can be removed from office or disqualified from running for office if they've also engaged in an insurrection against the United States. So if it is held that President Trump did play a role in an insurrection against the U.S., that disqualifies him from being U.S. president under the 14th Amendment. In fact, the fact of bringing this prosecution against President Trump, if that does proceed, may even allow states like New Mexico to disqualify Trump from appearing on the ballot because they've already held in their state court system, all the way up to the New Mexico Supreme Court, as they did against Coy Griffin, that January 6th was indeed an insurrection. So even a two-bit state court can disqualify him on the state ballot.
It's going to be a free-for-all, and there will be little skirmishes all across the country. And just like we talked about during the COVID pandemic, I'm having flashbacks. I'm sure many of you are too. We'll have little battles taking place unless the Supreme Court comes in and settles this. And is the Supreme Court going to settle something that is really within the purview of the various state legislatures? Remember, during the COVID era, we saw Democratic groups, many of them spearheaded by guys like Mark Elias, were filing lawsuits in various battleground states around this country, using COVID as the pretext to adjust the election in their favor, moving dates around, waiving signature requirements, extending collections, authorizing drop boxes, all the things. They got the election contorted in their favor. Now, they're going to do the same thing again. In this case, they're going to be filing petitions and other lawsuits to remove Donald Trump based on this new set of charges. And it will be, once again, a set of skirmishes in the various states. And we'll see what the judges do.
Say this as someone who is running against President Trump for the presidency in this election, in this GOP primary. I do not want to see my opponents eliminated because of the actions of a corrupt federal administrative police state. That is why I've said that if I'm elected, I will shut the FBI and other corrupt institutions down. But I don't want to get there by seeing my competition eliminated. That is not how our constitutional republic is supposed to function. We're not supposed to be a country where the party in power uses police force to indict and eliminate its political opponents. And yet now we're on the cusp of potentially a third indictment, which, unlike the last two, literally under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, could be invoked to eliminate my competition, President Trump, from holding office, and that is wrong. Yes, politically for me or any of the other candidates in the GOP primary, it would be easier if President Trump were eliminated. For many donors in the Republican primary base, this would be a moment of celebration. I think it is a moment of mourning in this country.
Yeah, I agree with that.
You mark my words as to why. What happened on January 6, 2021, I don't want to see that happen again in this country. But if we go down this road of weaponizing our justice system against disfavored political opponents, then January 6, 2021 will just be a preview of far worse to come. I don't want to see that happen.
No,
I don't want to see us march to a national divorce. I want to lead us to a national revival. And the only way we're going to get there is by confronting the ugly truth of the present itself. That's why I'm running for president. And that's why I will condemn this politicized prosecution and persecution against my opponent.
Right on. So an absolute banger from Vivek. He is, I think, dead right about this. I don't think they have any idea what they're doing or what the consequences of this will be. I think they live in a bubble there in Washington, D.C., and they glad hand amongst themselves, pat each other on the back, go to Subway together, and they indulge in the little antics of the meaning behind a Subway sandwich and walking around on CNN. And then, this is what they do. But I don't think they understand that there is another part of this country that doesn't see things the way that they see them and doesn't believe in the legitimacy of the DC establishment bureaucrats. And so what Vivek is talking about, as I think, is a long-term consequence of the failing legitimacy of these institutions. It's going to be not good for anybody. And these people, in their efforts to so-called save democracy, are really sowing the seeds of their own destruction and potentially the destruction of the current form of America. Because once you start prosecuting your political opponents, the pendulum swings both ways. There's a reason we haven't done this before in all of America's amazing history. And finally, we land at this moment in time, and we've got 4 indictments from these maniacs for conduct that is, by any measure, less serious than anything that Hillary Clinton did or what Joe Biden has even done, just on the mechanics of the law. And we can play that game all day. But the point is, Vivek is saying that this is corrupt. If he's elected, he's going to shut down the FBI. But as it stands now, what they're doing is hurting his political opponents. It is not to his benefit. It is actually a day for mourning in America. And I think he's right over the mark on that. Now, we have other candidates reacting because maybe the Insurrection Clause would serve them. Maybe it would benefit them if Trump's not on the ballot anymore, and maybe they just want to move on from it. So we had a little bit of a debate on Twitter today. Alex B. posted this one. Brucewitz says, Rod DeSantis just said that Trump should have come out more forcefully. And so there was this clip going around. It's 15 seconds.
Being brought up on criminal charges and doing things like, for example, I think it was shown how he was in the White House and didn't do anything while things were going on. He should have come out more forcefully. Of course, that difference between.
All right. So, and then this is the full clip, and you can be the judge. I'm not so sure it's really out of context, but here's the full clip.
First, you mentioned in your earlier answer, you talked about the criminalization of politics, but you also mentioned it wasn't about whether it's right or wrong. Do you think that former President Trump's actions were wrong on January 6th? And separately, do you think that gay and transgender people should serve openly in the military, on a separate topic?
Two questions.
Okay, so the second one, we said we're not going to do the transgender or the gender ideology, and that's a mission readiness. That had been the policy prior to Biden. He's changed it. He's included the sex change and all that. So we're going to go back to pre-Biden on the gender ideology for that. So look, there's a difference between being brought up on criminal charges and doing things. Like, for example, I think it was shown how he was in the White House and didn't do anything while things were going on. He should have come out more forcefully. Of course that. But to try to criminalize that, that's a different issue entirely.
Which is like one half of Liz Cheney's argument. So Liz Cheney says that he didn't do anything and that not doing anything was criminal. It's almost like gross negligence. You know, you sort of have to, if you're a parent, you can't let your kid go kill themselves. If you do that, you're negligent. It's a dereliction of duty type of an argument, which is basically what Liz Cheney was saying. But he's not going that far. He's making more of an executive argument. So, had I been there and if there was an insurrection-ish, that maybe I would have done something differently. It's just a difference of style. It's a difference of leadership. It's a difference of response. It's those things, but it doesn't take itself into the criminal realm. So it's...
And I think that we want to be in a situation where, you don't have one side just constantly trying to put the other side in jail. And that, unfortunately, is what we're seeing now. So there's, again, someone had whispered this to me, so I'm sure I'll have a chance to look at this in the future, depending on the developments. But I...
Okay, so
what I was going to do. Okay, well, thank you all.
So Ron did have some time to think about that. He was on with Jake Tapper today, and Jake Tapper asked him about this during an exclusive interview, and here's what he said.
This country is going down the road of criminalizing political differences, and I think that's wrong. Alvin Bragg stretched a statute in Manhattan to be able to try to target Donald Trump. Most people, even people on the left, acknowledge if that wasn't Trump, that case would not have likely been brought against a normal civilian. And so you have a situation where the Department of Justice, FBI, have been weaponized against people they don't like. And the number one example of that happened to be against Donald Trump with the Russia collusion. That was not a legitimate investigation. That was being done to try to drive Trump out of office. And so what I've said as president, my job is to restore a single standard of justice.
Okay, so we'll just pause on that just quickly. And I agree with him. I think that was done to drive Trump out of office. But just so we're clear, that was by the same Department of Justice. Okay, that's the same entity that's doing this right now.
To end weaponization of these agencies, we're going to have a new FBI director on day one. We're going to have big changes at the Department of Justice.
Okay.
Americans across the political spectrum need to have confidence that what is going on is based on the rule of law, not based on what political tribe you're in.
That's Ron DeSantis. I'd like to hear a little bit more about what his take is on this January 6th stuff. We know the Russia thing was a collusion hoax proffered by them. Does he think this is legitimate? We'll see. I think a lot of people are motivated by the fact that Donald Trump offered an alternative solution. He beat them at their own game. They're the biggest sore losers and bullies that this country has ever seen. He never even got a legitimate shot at having a fair shake at doing his job when he was elected because he was dogged by the Democrats at every turn. They undermine him and they have turned him into this alleged criminal for conduct that is so far beneath the other criminal conduct that we've seen out of these other so-called leaders. It is just laughable. So the double standards, the bullying, and the fact that Trump never even got a fair opportunity are motivating people. And the fact that the DOJ is now what feels like an extension of the Democratic Party is not something that people want to live with in this country. So they are, my belief is, going to rally even harder around Donald Trump. The more they try to remove him, the more the energy will coalesce to support him. And of course, we will continue to cover as we watch this case develop, and we hope you subscribe and join us as we do.